All right, folks, we're going to get underway. Thank you for being here. Pleasure to see you all. See some familiar faces, some unfamiliar faces, which is good to see as well. Folks, it's a 4-day week. Tomorrow we're off, right? So have a round of applause for that, huh? All right. So couple quick things. If you're here for credit for your class, make sure you registered on the way in. There's a sign-in sheet outside that's open until 3:45, and if you haven't signed in yet, you're not going to get a chance to do so until we're done at the very, very end. Okay, so as these tables are being moved, we're going to bring our speakers up in just a second. But this is for you folks. So please, I have some of your questions here, but don't be afraid to ask additional questions, things like that. We'll ask a quick note before we turn it over to our speakers. This is a PRSSA-sponsored event. You see some PRSSA folks in the room. Raise your hand if you're a PRSSA member. If you have any questions about what it's like to be a member, if you want to join, feel free to ask them. This is one of our first panel discussions. We plan to do more in the future, and we'd love to hear ideas from you folks about things you want to hear about. So today's all about event planning and management. We have 4 professionals here, 2 from outside the university, 2 from inside the university to take your questions. So a round of applause for their undevoted time there. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Okay. So without further ado, we'll bring our speakers up and we'll get underway. Folks, you want to come on down? All right. Why not keep the applause going? Sure. All right, folks, so as our presenters get seated down here, I will read off some quick bio information, and then we'll turn it over to you. If anybody did not get one of these on the way in, feel free to grab it. Bio information's here, and I'm sure our speakers are more than willing to chat with you folks after as well. If you have a 4:30 class, please stick around to about 4:20 or 4:25, just so there's enough time to not have everybody flying out here at the last second, okay? So first up, we have Daniela Grafman over here. Daniela is a certified wedding and event planner and partner at Vision Event Co. Daniela, thanks for joining us today. Next up, we have Stella Maher. She serves as the Director of Alumni Relations at Kane, organizing multiple different events of all sizes to bring alumni together. How many seniors do we have here? So you'll be hearing from Stella probably relatively soon, right? Okay. Next up, we have Danielle Rothweiler. Danielle has worked with celebrities including Dancing with the Stars. Believe it or not, I know what that show is. Pro Lindsay Arnold, and designed her wedding day, which was featured in People, US Weekly, and Style Me Pretty. And last but not least, we have Gina Lampisona, who is here at Kane University as the Managing Assistant Director of Conference and Event Services, some of which I know you folks have interned with already. So last minute, round of applause for all our speakers here. And I'll turn it over to these folks now going in order. Just a quick get to know me, some quick facts about them, charting their career path, so on and so forth. So Gina, we'll start with you.
Hi, everyone. I actually studied communications, which most of you are in, at Montclair. And then I worked at a few PR companies, and I transitioned into event planning. I worked at Kleinfeld's Bridal in the city, and then I worked at a catering company, and now I am here. So kind of went from the PR aspect right into event planning. So I have kind of both background in that aspect.
Hi, everybody. I'm Danielle, and I actually have 2 bachelor degrees that are completely unrelated to wedding, event planning, or PR. They are in meteorology and political science. They look really nice on my wall at home. I graduated from Penn State in 2003, and I went into event planning because I just always was planning events in general and started working for another company. And after a while of getting some experience from that company, I then started my own, and that was about 8 or 9 years, we're in 2016, about 8 or 9 years ago, and that's it, here we are.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Stella, and I am your Director of Alumni Relations here at Kane. I also have an undergraduate degree that I really don't use anymore, but that factored into my career experience that I've had. So I went to Lehigh, right down the highway in Pennsylvania, and studied theater and wanted to be a high school theater teacher. So I did that for a few years and found out that what I wanted to do, what I thought I wanted to do, wasn't actually what I really wanted to do. And I'd always wanted to be in higher ed and academia. So I was lucky enough to go from that to getting a position at Columbia as the Assistant Director of University Events and Programs. So at Columbia, we organized about 120 events a year for both alumni relations, fun events like homecoming, all the way through development events. We took groups of donor prospects through Venice, Italy for 4 days, and everything from getting them where they need to be, making sure they have umbrellas and water bottles and things, from breakfast through dinner, touring around Venice. So got to do a lot of great events there. Probably a lot of my answers will come from that experience, not because I prioritize Columbia over Kane, just because that's where I was more on the event side. I went from there to Atlanta, where I worked with our alumni volunteers at Emory, and that brought me here to Kane, where we do all things for alumni. So we do a number of events throughout the year. I think in April we've got 12 events alone coming up. But we also do all the communications, the website, magazine, newsletters, and anything like alumni ID cards as well. So we'll pull on both of those for you guys.
Hi everyone, I'm Daniela. My company is Vision Event Company. I graduated with a communications and psychology degree from Fordham University in New York, and I was on the PR track as well originally. I got into fashion PR, which was very cool for a hot second, and then I did Fashion Week, where I realized I wanted to be on the other side of events, or on the other side of production, which was events. And from there, I actually got to work with a production company in the city and followed that up by working at a nonprofit in their special events department. That was kind of where my heart has always been, but working in nonprofits is difficult, so I made the segue into the private sector, where I met my current business partner, and we started our company and have been doing weddings, social events, and now get hired by nonprofits as well. So a little bit of both angles from the event planning side.
All right, fantastic. Thank you for that. Folks, if you have any questions, feel free to put your hand up. Carmen over here is going to be having our microphone and passing it around for any types of questions. I'll get us started off with one. What was the first experience you each can ever remember where you were in charge of the event and it was you and only you, kind of that on the island mentality? When was the first possible time you can recall? What was that like? Open question in the room here.
Well, I can go back. You know, I would say the first experience was even an undergrad. And if any of you guys have heard me speak at Kane before, I think what you do in your volunteer roles in your undergraduate or graduate experience is just as valuable as some of the career experience you'll get. So being involved in an honor society or being involved in the drama club, we did a number of events and get-togethers just for students like that. With the drama club, we worked on planning an alumni reunion. So being in charge of those things is definitely a great experience you can use as you're then interviewing for full-time jobs like we have today as well.
Sure. She was talking, I was like, okay, so what was the first thing that I was actually in charge of? You know, when I was at Penn State, I was really involved in putting together a lot of events, and it actually bothers me that it didn't click sooner that maybe I should go into event planning. It wasn't until after I had my degrees that I thought, I wish I could have gone back and taken some courses or marketing or something like that. Because they didn't have event planning or PR or anything in that nature available. They do now, but whatever. But we were planning a lot of events through my sorority and through the associations that I belong to. I am active in the Alumni Association as well, so I help plan those events. But as far as something, my first one that I was actually in charge of, I guess that would be when I started my own company and the first client that came in, which I'm really struggling to think who that was, but it was a wedding, and it is a little nerve-wracking to know that your name and your company that's all over this wedding, and it's this person's theoretically once-in-a-lifetime day, and there are no do-overs. It's not a dress rehearsal. You get one shot to get everything right, and it's an awful lot of pressure. So the first time you're doing it and you're in charge, I still feel today that I learn something, if not 50 new things, with every wedding and event that I plan and work on. I always have something new to add to my emergency kit, something new that happens, something. I'm always saying on the day of a wedding, I don't know why I'm surprised with anything anymore, but I still am. And so the first wedding that I did, you kind of are just feeling your way through. You can know as much as you know and have as much experience as you do, but you are never going to be able to prepare for things that just pop up that you could never predict, that you could never like read about online in some forum, or somebody tells you, this could happen, that could happen. None of that stuff could happen. Something else could happen. So that was what was very nerve-wracking for me on my first wedding, and then obviously a couple weddings after that, knowing that if you screw up, it's on you. And of course, depending on the client, it could rain and be your fault. So it depends on the client with that.
I would say my first one actually was at the PR company I was at. My boss actually threw me into an event. She did the PR for the Housewives in New Jersey, so she was sick and said, go run the event. So being an intern in a company and saying, this is your event and run it and do the follow-up on it, I was very, very scared. So it was just the difficulty of not having someone behind you to answer all the questions. It was for the first time where I was the front runner, and you had to kind of steal the show away, kind of like you were saying. Nothing, it's not like it's a dress rehearsal, it's not like it's like a redo you get, it's one event and that's how it is. So it's kind of just making sure that everything was up to par with what it was supposed to be.
Yeah, it's crazy, but the first event that was really my own territory was my high school prom. My high school, and it's funny because I also kind of wish I had figured it out sooner, but I figured it out soon enough. But our high school, I went to a really small high school. We had about 40 graduating students, and we hadn't had a prom in about 5 or 6 years. And my best friend and I were like, we have to have a prom. There's no way I'm going to graduate high school without having one. And they said, the administration basically said, well, if you want to do it, you have to figure it out. You have to figure out how you're going to pay for it, you're going to plan it, how much the tickets are going to cover it, and really all the details. And we literally pulled on every single one of our connections that we had at the time. It was one of our good friends, her brother was older and had a friend who was a DJ, and someone else, had a caterer, and one of the teachers told us that they knew that they were a photographer so they can come in. And we were in New York, so we were like, we can find a space and we'll pay for it with our tickets. And I remember coming into it the night of, and like you're dressed up and you're doing your pictures, and all I could think about was, I hope people have fun. Like, I hope no one throws up and it's okay. And it went off and it was great. And it wasn't until, a few years later that I actually realized I wanted to do this for a living. But I still think about that as like my starting point. And if I could do it then, there's so much more I could do now with all the things that I've learned. So that was definitely, never know.
What an experience. We'll turn over to the audience, folks. Anybody have any questions? A show of hands if you have any questions. Carmen's here. Okay, another one from over here. Quick one. How did you yes, Mr. Burgos.
Speaking of public relations terms, what do events do for the PR aspect from the company that they're going to work on, the company or the event they're going to sponsor? Is that kind of too broad?
Yes and no. So every event is so different than the last. Like Danielle was saying, you can't really anticipate everything, but especially with PR, let's say, we'll stick it to corporate events right now or nonprofit. Every event that you do, the first question you're going to ask is, what's the goal of the event? What are you trying to accomplish? Are you trying to promote a product? Are you trying to raise awareness? Are you trying to raise money? Is it a combination of everything? So with, kind of looking at all angles of what your goals are, that you're kind of going to work backwards into figuring out what kind of event you need to throw to accomplish those goals. And that's where PR and events come hand in hand. So without the event, you wouldn't have something to promote, basically, to do the PR for, and without the PR, you wouldn't be able to achieve all the exposure that you need and all the goals of that event.
Anybody else care to add to that? Has anybody perhaps had experience working with an event oriented with a PR plan or something that was revolving a launch or things like
Yeah,
that?
sure. I mean, I've worked with a couple of different PR firms and putting together events, and there's definitely, we were talking about this before we even came up here, there's a lot of overlap between PR and event planning, but there are also some severe differences between the two, because while we understand how everything works, a publicist isn't going to necessarily understand why we need a floor chart or a timeline or the way that the event would flow best for it to make sense. And at the same time, the event professional is not going to have those connections to start reaching out saying, okay, I need this person to cover it, I want this press coverage to come, what are we doing for the press? They're going to know the questions to ask if you have celebrities or somebody there that you want interviewed. Well, you need to know in advance on the PR side, who is available for interview, what time, where are they going to be, what questions will they not ask, and all that stuff. And that's on the PR side, and then they need to communicate with the event planner with, okay, what time does your event start, how much time can you give me to do this? So it works hand in hand. There just has to be enough communication and understanding on both sides for the event planner to say, listen, I don't know how to do this stuff because this is your area, and the publicist has to have the same respect back. It can't be about egos with, I can handle everything. It's okay, you don't have to handle everything. You just work together as a team.
And to piggyback for that question, how about for either Stella or Gina, how does some of the work you do kind of forward the plan and alumni relations or forward the university's plan, let's say, having these conference and events and services and things of that nature?
Sure. So I feel like all the time I'm talking to my staff about the publicity or the marketing of the event, that if we can't market it appropriately, then there's no point in even doing the event. We've done a lot of surveys in the alumni relations world about what do alumni want, what do they want to feel more connected to their university, and they want to know that events are happening. Doesn't always mean they want to actually go to the event, but they want to see that there are these happy hours, these networking nights, these things that are going on. So it also factors into who do we invite to an event? How far out do you publicize it? When we do homecoming on campus every fall, we invite every single alum in the entire database, whether they live in New Jersey or they live in China. And we know they may not fly back here from China to go to homecoming, but it's still nice to be invited, to be included in that, to feel like Kane is thinking of them and reaching out to them. So I think that's applicable to any nonprofit as well, that your marketing before an event and after event can be just as important as what's happening that day. We always follow up with the pictures of the event. And when you put pictures of the event on social media, a lot of times you get people to connect that maybe never thought of going, and they see the pictures and they're like, oh man, I missed out. I should have gone to that. It looks great. Let me go next time. So you've got to think kind of that whole aspect about how that fits in before and after as well.
Gina?
With us with PR, it's a little different for our department. We're a new department in the university, so we've had to kind of overcome a lot of other obstacles. We're a group who is trying to get in outside weddings, social events, bar mitzvahs, conferences, and a lot of time it's getting the stigma away from a lot of people that's a university. So how am I going to have my wedding there? So it's the marketing and the PR aspect of bringing that and saying, yes, we are a university and we do great at that, but we also can do all these other things to you. We're also a venue that can have housing components into it. We can have venues. We have all different types. So it's kind of getting that word out there. And the same thing you were saying, it's who do we reach out to? How do we get that out there and that message out there to them?
Turn the questions over to the audience. Anybody have a question here? Yep.
Hi. So I'm a graduate assistant on campus in School of General Studies, and we do a lot of events for freshmen, workshops, social events, academic events. My question to you is, what would you suggest are different ways outside of emailing or posting flyers, handing out flyers, to try and get the students more engaged into college events?
I would say a lot of do a lot of social media sites as well and start that. That's the thing that we've kind of grown our aspect of the conference service side business out, is a lot of the Instagram, the Facebook, setting up pages, doing different themes, making it different. So think outside the box for the events that you do for the students or whoever's coming into it. Don't do just kind of, come in for a lunch and do something different. Maybe do a night event or a breakfast, or change the venue up and switch it, not here, do it somewhere else. So it's all about kind of making it different and bringing them in.
I haven't done a college event in a while, but we do this in some of our marketing, personally for my company, or also organizations that I do for the event industry. Get testimonials from the students that come to the events, whether it's a quick picture and a few words of why they're there or their experience of being there, and then use that as content to share. So if you create a quick image online of a picture of people having fun or doing something, an activity at your event, and add a testimonial of their experience, and use that as your invitation, or share that on Instagram and tag those people. Mm-hmm. People start connecting when people see faces that they recognize, and it's like Yelp reviews. You'll listen to Yelp reviews because it's real people that might work.
Definitely, as Gina said, I think meeting people where they are. I hate email. I feel like there's so much noise there that it's really hard to weed through it. And I hear that from our students a lot as well. So of course, hitting social media. You might also try some sort of like bring a friend sort of aspect, like the person who brings the most friends, or if you bring a friend, you get a prize or some sort of kind of bonus for that as well, just to get people to, bring other people that are going along. And then we in the alumni world also kind of go back and forth on guest lists. There's a lot of, when we have our registration software where people are signing up ahead of time, you have the option sometimes with a registration software to show the guest list or hide the guest list. So in my last role at Emory, we had it set up so the guest list would show after 10 people had signed up. Because there's always that hump you have to get over. If I'm thinking about going to an event and I see only 2 people have signed up, I'm not going to sign up because it looks like it's going to be a bust. But once you have at least 10 or 12 people on there, then it's like, oh, other people are going, I might go. Or if you're thinking about a reunion, I want to see that someone I know is going as well. So I don't know, kind of applying it to students, but even a host committee where they know, I know someone who's going to be there, my friend will be there, there'll be someone I can talk to at the event as well. That'll help have them feel more comfortable attending too.
Yeah, I mean, I really agree with the whole social media aspect as well. You really have to embrace that, because just in general with marketing in this industry, nobody is really using advertising sites anymore. Everybody's relying on social media, and the joke was that it was free, but now Instagram is pushing posts down just the way that Facebook did, and so is Twitter, and because they all own each other. But so it's tough, but you have to be able to use the hashtags and have a hashtag with every single event, because it's so incredibly powerful. And figure out who's going to your other events and the audience that you want there, and see who they're following, what hashtags interest them. You have to do research that way on your audience to see what their social media background is all about, because if they are following certain accounts, look at what those hashtags are. How did it get them there? So you have to see how they get to you and what their interests are, and carry that through the event as well. You know, you can get a photo booth and have it go straight to Instagram feeds and have a hashtag associated with it. So it doesn't just stop to in the beginning, you should carry it through the entire event. If you can stream it, if you can do Snapchat while you're at the event, Periscope, anything like that. And then afterwards, you do the same thing with the hashtag to show, you know, what happened at the event, the pictures afterwards, and so on and so forth. Social media, I can't say enough about it. That's absolutely the way to get everybody's attention, because that's where everybody is.
Shameless plug, folks, if you didn't get a chance to take an Instagram picture with our little frame outside, make sure you take one on the way out, post it on there.
Tag us.
Yes, tag
Hashtag
everybody,
us.
please.
Tag, yeah,
Yeah, tag us.
So,
Quick story
to your-
about social
Yeah, go ahead,
media.
please, yeah.
So I just did a wedding two weeks ago, and they found me on Instagram a month before their wedding because they were up on a Saturday night, it was about midnight, drinking, trying to fill out a timeline for one of their vendors, and realized that they were stressed out of their minds and could not figure out how to do it. And so they literally started just looking at pictures on Instagram of their wedding reception venue and seeing what things were hashtag under it, and found my company because we've done events there. And they reached out, and I literally had a month, and we did their wedding, and it was incredible. And again, can't speak enough about social media and what it means. But will not preface, but add a caveat to that. You're in college right now, and I feel like it was a little different. I was in college not that long ago, but think about your brand and what you're putting out there into the world as part of your social media. If you need to separate it so that it's, you know, you personally and then your brand, or what you're trying to make your brand, it's super important, because what you put out there, you can't really take down. And how people perceive you, they'll take with them, and how they interact with you, and if they hire you, and how other vendors work with you, and all that. So just keep that in mind as you're getting through college right now.
They only had MySpace when I was in college, and I'm really, really happy about that, okay?
You would be in trouble.
Other folks have questions from the audience? Yes.
As event planners, do you have, like, you were talking about posting content on Twitter, do you have, like, PR or marketing people, or is it all in-house, you guys handle all of that?
Open question to the panel here.
Yeah. I have worked with publicists before. I actually do have a PR company that I work with, and it's mostly for media exposure and getting my work into publications faster than I could. And I like to see my work published in print, online, and because the more you are online, the easier your SEO goes up and everything like that. I have the connections I have because I've been published and whatnot, but a PR company is going to have a lot more. And the PR company that I work with now is strictly wedding and events. So they only represent people in the industry. And it's not just event planners, they represent, you know, stationery, DJ, everything. And they have a very strong presence. And they're actually based all the way out in California, but they have people in New York and Kentucky and Florida and wherever. And they give you opportunities to get in front of editors that you would have never known about, because they have the relationships with those editors. They know what the editors want, and so they can email me and say, hey, the editor of such and such, you know, Borrowed in Blue, says they're looking for this type of wedding. I know you have this in your portfolio, I saw this on your website. Can you send me like 3-5 high-res, no watermark images? And they're published. And I could have that same exact contact information, and my email could be ignored. So I think there is a definite benefit to having a publicist. I just think you have to, it's all about managing how much can you afford, what do your advertising dollars look like? Because when I first started this, my advertising dollars were not in PR, they were on, you know, wedding websites and everything. I am now not on any of those sites anymore, and all of my advertising dollars are SEO and Facebook ads and PR, because that's the way it is now.
Danielle, anything to add to that?
Yeah, so we don't have an internal, well, we have an internal team, basically. My company's a little bit of a hybrid because we do entertainment and event planning, so our team is a little diverse. But what we do is we came up with a plan. You know, we want things to be consistent, so we rebranded last year, and we want to make sure that everything that we put on Instagram and Facebook is representative of that. And so we'll come up with plans on how we post or what we post and in what capacity. Like if we know we're having an event, this is what needs to get posted. This is the tone that we're going to speak in because this is how we want to be represented. So we have strategies in place, but we take care of it in-house.
And to expand that question for either Stella or Gina, do you ever rely on the PR arm here at the university, or do you do anything in-house to kind of spread the awareness for your own events? Or
Yeah, we work very closely with university relations. At one point in time, our division had a director of communications, and we no longer do. So we definitely try to work with the university to make sure that everything is on brand, that everything looks like Kane is similar. If you're interested in the nonprofit world, it's definitely something to think about in terms of what size shop that you go work in. With my Columbia job, where I was exclusively events, we had 30 people doing alumni relations. 5 of us did events, 5 people did communications, the other people were in other areas. Here at Kane, there are 2 full-time employees in alumni relations. And there's pros and cons to both. That's not a bad thing about Kane necessarily. In a big shop, you're a specialist. So you work very closely on one area and you do that area all the time. I was that way both at Columbia and at Emory. At Kane, because we're a smaller shop, you get to have your hand in a lot of other things and be a generalist. So it's something for you to think about on where you want your career to go. It might be good to be a specialist for a little while and really hone a skill, but then take that to a place where you can be a generalist or start out that way so you can get your hand into lots of different things. So again, instead of just doing events at Columbia, now here at Kane, we do events, we do the magazine, we do the website, we do the social media, we do the help desk calls, and a little bit of everything. So kind of how focused do you want your career to start off in that way?
Gina, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would say the same thing as our department. The only difference that we kind of have is a lot of the times we reach out to university relations more is we have a lot of couples who will get married here, who've met here, certain spots on campus. So we make sure we reach out to university relations so they can get that out in the press, in the magazines. We make sure, we had a couple recently that met on the football field. So we said, all right, let's get photos of you guys on the football field together for your engagement shots and get that in all the magazines and editorials. I can't do that as well as they can do, so that's where kind of we come hand in hand helping each other out.
Questions from the audience? We'll come back to you folks. Do we have a hand up back there for a while? Yep, here, okay.
I don't think you need I don't need no microphone. I wanted to take it back a couple steps in regards to time-wise, especially for like weddings and certain events, not maybe educational events, but more like party events. How long does it take you guys to an average to plan an event like that? Can you balance like a full-time job and that on the side, or is it something that you need to devote your full attention to?
Folks, feel free.
You want to start?
Okay. Well, I have two kids. They're 1 and 4, so I would say that's my other full-time job. Event planning is all I do. I do know a lot of event planners that do start out with it as something that is part-time, and the reason for that is because it's a fairly saturated industry, especially in this part of the country, and so for that, I always recommend, work for another company, do the part-time stuff, assist on the actual event or, the month leading up to it, because that's really when a lot of crazy stuff comes together. And if you can get through that, then you can handle event planning, because none of that stuff is fun the month leading up to a wedding, believe me. The designing stuff, yeah, that's great. And then the month before, when you have to actually handle logistics, ugh. That's where I would say if you could do that part-time, that would be a great opportunity for you to learn and see if you really do like it, and if you like what that company is doing but you want to do it a different way, or you want to switch to another company or a different type of events. You may do weddings and then find out you don't want to do social, you'd rather do corporate. It's all about getting in it to really learn about it. The hard and challenging thing about doing it full-time is, the way I look at it is, the last event that I have on my calendar to be planned is my unemployment date. So if nothing happens after that, I have no money coming in. Like that's my mortgage, that's my paycheck, and that's a very frightening thing, because on top of planning and being busy, you have to constantly be out there networking and promoting and doing all of that as well to make sure you still have people coming in. Because there is always, after, as long as I've been doing it, there is still that in the back of your mind, what if the phone never rings? What if, I had this past December, 2 Decembers ago, my entire year was booked, and I was fine. This past December, this year for 2016 was very, very light, and I'm freaking out, and I'm talking to other vendors. No, engagement season just started. Well, that's great. My calendar was booked this time last year, and I've got too light of a calendar and something happened in January, February, March, where everyone got engaged and everybody wants to get married this year, and now my calendar is full because 2016 couples have lost their minds. But but and that was an industry-wide thing because I'm trying to plan these weddings and I'm reaching out to vendors and they're all available. Why are you available? Because they all had the same exact problem. So it changes every year, but to do, if you're going to have a full-time job to, pay the bills and put food on the table, I would say the best thing to do is do the planning part-time for another company. That way you can learn and try and get it as close to the wedding date as possible. I don't know how you would balance a full-time job and planning as well. One of the arguments I use with my clients is that wedding planning is a full-time job, and most of my clients have full-time jobs, which is why they hire the planner. And then there's, life and wanting to sleep and that kind of stuff too.
So I'm sorry, I have one more question. Do you charge the same to your client, whether it's $100,000 wedding to a $30,000 wedding?
The details of the wedding matter a lot more to me than the budget. If it's going to be a wedding at a person's home where I'm going to have to bring everything in, tents, tables, chairs, food, cake, like the whole nine, that's a lot more work, and I'm going to ask for a lot more staff to help me the day before, the day of, the day after, the week leading up to it, and then they all get paid. So if it's logistically difficult, if there's a lot of design work, the more that I have to do, then the higher the fee is going to be. I would like to say it's comparable to the budget, but I don't ask for a budget and then think, okay, I'm going to take 10-15% of that. I want to know the budget so I know, okay, here's your budget and what do you want to be done? Because there are a lot of times, because there's so much bad information out there, that people will come with a budget, then they tell me what they want, and I say, I need you to double it, because that's never happening. And they're not willing to do that. Well, then it's gonna be too much work for me to be able to find that stuff at that number, and I have other clients with more realistic budgets. So it's more about the details, and then, of course, if the clients are going to be a pain in the neck, and you can tell right when they walk in your office door if they are, so then you have to bring the price up.
Danielle, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree 200%. I think it's really hard. It's almost, I would say, almost impossible to be a successful, like a legitimately successful event planner having a full-time job that's not your event planning company. That being said, it is very difficult to start something off the ground and go running into it because it's a small business and we are small business owners and we deal with the month to month of paycheck or no paycheck. But my biggest suggestion, I mean, same thing, whether it's freelancing for other companies or, I mean, right now, and I say this every time I speak at a class at Kane, you have your professors, you have 4 people sitting up here right now who are in the industry, who are willing to give you resources, to connect you with other industry professionals. I mean, half my time, and I'm doing this full time now for the last almost 5 years, half my time is spent on networking. It's on building my relationships with my existing vendors, my existing partners, and then new ones, and new places that will refer me business. People also just knowing me in the industry. You want to build a reputation. So if you're not out there and people don't know you, I mean, especially in a world of social media, it's gonna hurt. It's gonna hurt your return, and then you're not gonna be getting, so let's say you got one event under your belt, and that's great. The work to get the next event is gonna be so much harder because you don't have the time to do it full time, but that's okay. That's why you have internships and freelancing, and I mean, just the other week I reached out to the professor and I was like, I have this friend in the industry who's looking for help. Do you know any of your students that would be interested? I mean, now I have this pool of people that I'd be happy to get into the industry as long as you're educated in it. And that's the biggest thing. Before you run into starting or trying to do this full-time or even part-time, educate yourself on it. You have a class now, which is amazing. I mean, I didn't have a class 7 years ago. It was all just learning from experience. But take those resources. Don't just look at what's happening on, who's dress, I don't even know the shows. The
Anything,
David Tara,
any of them.
They're great. They're awesome. They're great entertainment. But there's so much that goes on in the back end. Ask questions. Like what you're doing right now, this is amazing. Ask, and now you'll have our contact information. Reach out to us. Ask us how, even if we don't have the opportunities for you, I'm more than happy to explain what the process is so that you can go into it in the right way.
Just to piggyback off that question, since we scratched the surface, things students should be doing right now, our seniors, our juniors, and even if you're freshman or sophomore, what can they do? We'll go right down the line here if you don't mind.
Sure. The one thing I would say is internships are key. When I first came here and I spoke in your professor's class, not many people have done internships. And when you're in the event planning industry, or you want to even PR, because I was in PR, they look for your internships, they look for your experience. They value your education as well, but that experience pushes you forward from the next candidate who's had nothing. So I would say definitely internships. Get out there, do more than one, pick one a semester. Yes, you're going to give up a lot of your weekend and your free time, but if you want to be in the industry, it's something you have to get used to. So.
What are you talking about? I have all my weekends to myself. Yeah, I agree with that. You know, get out there and do the internships and find companies that are looking for help. And believe me, there are plenty of companies that are looking for assistance. And it varies from person to person and vendor to vendor. If some planners are looking for help the week of and just the wedding, some planners want you there for months leading up to it, so you can really learn what it takes to fully plan an event from A to Z. So any opportunity you can get is really important because, especially in the wedding planning world, one of the reasons it's so saturated is because you do have a lot of women that get married and they had the best time ever planning their wedding, and now they're a wedding planner, and they have absolutely no experience except for planning their own. And so you will do so much better to have the real experience and be able to say, yeah, listen, I did this wedding. People will ask you for examples. Give me a nightmare story. What do you do? And they'll go on the internet and print out the top 10 things you're supposed to ask a wedding planner. And if you have the experience, you'll actually be able to answer those questions. And that's really important.
And answer them genuinely, which people can read.
Yeah.
So in addition to internships, we did touch on, any event planning that you can do in your leadership and extracurricular roles as well. We heard sorority events and prom. Just getting that experience. The more events you do, the less you'll stress out about them. When we were churning out events at Columbia, one of the best things that I learned was, same thing as if you're a performer, if you're singing. If you make a mistake, as long as no one else knows, it's fine. But you need to be able to control your own emotions and how you handle that to get through the event successfully and make sure that the audience at the event doesn't realize anything's going on. So the more practice you have with that, the more prepared you'll be to handle whatever pops up. And something always pops up. There's no event where something doesn't go slightly wrong, but it's how you handle it and getting prepared to work through those as well.
Don't tell the client,
Don't
ever.
tell the client, ever. Two quick things. The first, go off my own personal experience when I was in college. When I realized that I wanted to be in events, it was my senior year. I didn't know anyone in the industry. My first internship was literally off Craigslist. Found an event production company in the city, which was great, but I knew that was only for the summer. So I literally made speaking of PR, I literally made all of my friends, my family, my professors, they became my PR. Everyone in my circle knew that I wanted to be in events. And the way that I actually ended up meeting my current business partner was through a good friend of mine who's getting married tonight, funny enough, who met my business partner at an event, and he was telling them about this company he was starting, and he really had to get it off the ground, just needed the right people. And my friend was like, oh, I think I know someone, why don't you just talk to her? So, and then my professor, my psych professor, least likely person, connected me with a friend of his. He made me go to this event. It was this reading for some organizational psychology class, and I went. We had to go around the circle, introduce ourselves. So I introduced myself. I said what I wanted to be doing. That speaker introduced me to a friend of his who's a big-time event planner in the city, who I ended up freelancing for the entire semester. I was doing 800-person events at the Waldorf. You never know. So right now, while you're in school, use those resources. My second quick thing is I'm going to do a quick plug. I'm a board member for the International Special Event Society. ISES is the acronym. Unfortunately, when
You know how you pronounce that?
It's ISIS. But regardless, It is an incredible outlet. There are students here in the room that have volunteered. There are other networking associations. If I had known about these when I was in college, I would so have been on that, because you literally can come into, and I'm also the director of student membership for the New Jersey North chapter, so I will gladly help you get into some of our events and become a member and take advantage of the benefits which are internationally based. So let's say you live here in New Jersey, but you are going out to California for the summer and you really want to work while you're having fun or just get some experience. We can literally, through the directory, connect you with event professionals in California and try to get you internships or just shadow someone or freelance. Use the resources. And again, I'll have my contact information and you can reach out and I'll let you know about them.
The one thing I just want to note on that is that's how I actually met Daniela and a lot of the people in the industry. I came out of college, had no idea what I wanted to do, and my friend Allison, who used to be a part of these organizations, brought me in, and I went in knowing no one. I know so many people in the industry now because of that organization, and I still go to a few once in a while, and that's how I met a lot of the people there, so definitely take that into consideration.
Other questions from the audience? Yes, right here. You want- While Carmen's doing that, Jeannie just wanted to mention something briefly as well.
One other thing, our department here at Kane, we do internships as well every semester. So if you're interested, just ask me for my card, and you can email me your resume, whatever semester that you're thinking. We do interviews, and it's one every semester, including the summer. So just keep that in mind if you guys are interested.
And that listing is also on my door, CAS 430. Yep.
My name is Shakila. I'm a graduate student. I recognize where there are seasonal opportunities or probably seasonal limitations in terms of events planning. What would be your best advice or recommendations to students who are looking to become a part of or seeing or pursuing a career in events planning? One of my reasons for asking is I know many companies do not separate event planning from their marketing department or their PR department, and therefore being involved in events would require other skill sets. So what would be your recommendation in making sure that people are holistically prepared for these other demands?
So I would say it really depends on what kind of company you're looking to work in. So, Danielle and I are small business owners, so we run our business and we have different limitations in the sense that we are small teams. I know when I worked at the nonprofit that I worked at, it was massive. It was a corporate-run nonprofit which had its marketing department, its PR department, and we were an events department. You kind of have to decide, and I feel like, honestly, the best way to figure this out is by having internships to figure out what you like and what you don't like. Do you want to go the more corporate route or the small business route? And it's not something that you might realize right away, but in figuring out which direction you'd like to go in, that kind of already sets you up for different opportunities. So right now, take different classes. So when I was in school, I was in communications and I literally took every possible class under the sun. Honestly, my psych degree has done more for me than I could have ever imagined. If I were to do anything else in my life and I wasn't doing events, well, I would say I would be a therapist, but I already am a therapist because that's what we do. So take on little, business classes. If you have any inclination to run a business sometime in the future, you're not really sure, take a business class. I wish I had taken a business class. If it weren't for my business partner who actually has business sense, I would be lost. I would be completely lost. So take a little bit from everything, and then also take different jobs. When I was in college, I worked for a counseling center, I worked for a law firm, I worked for the events department in my college, and I can't, every interview I went for in the events industry, I was able to pull on experiences from those other jobs that you would think had no relation to events, because it's a personable, it's a social industry. It's how you interact with people, it's experiences, it's what you do. So if you, let's say, you can't do an internship the entire semester, but you have to have a part-time job, try to get a job at, whatever, a medical office, anything that could eventually, working in front of people will give you that experience.
Anybody else care to share?
I'd say, as you're looking at these job postings and you're trying to figure out, how much of it is events, where are those events, how does it fit in? One thing to also pay attention to is whether you're working like at a venue, like you are. I love the Yankees, and I always thought it would be fun to work at Yankee Stadium and do events there. But if I did events at Yankee Stadium, I would have 3 rooms to choose from. I'd have basic, you can do this event, or this event. And the client would come to me each time, and I would set them up with kind of these 3 basic event formats. Versus working in a university, we're almost more on the client side. So at Columbia, I did events in Miami, Philly, Boston, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Venice, Italy, London. We set up events in Athens, Shanghai, Beijing. We traveled the country. We did Art Basel. We did Sundance Film Festival, because that's where our alumni or our clients were. So when you're thinking about if you want to do corporate events or work in an event venue, that's something to think about as well, is about what variety do you want, what are you comfortable with in that area too.
I think there's another, when Daniela was giving advice as like what courses you could take, a course that I would recommend is some sort of writing course, because you don't really think about how writing or anything like that would parlay into event planning, PR, and so on and so forth. But with all of the blogs and the articles and everything that is out now, there's so many opportunities to write about the wedding and the event planning industry. I write for 5 different outlets, and one of them is for Huffington Post. And that raises your credibility in the industry very, very quickly. And so if you're a good writer, from that, you could be approached by other magazines and publications saying, hey, we want to bring you on board. Can you write an editorial, 4 times a year and do sort of trends? And you will get approached. And that's another way to make money, because these are writing opportunities. And so I would say focus on writing if you have a chance, or if you like it and you're pushing it to the side because you don't have time or anything like that. Take a course here and there and just hone your writing skills, because you'd be surprised how handy those come in the event planning industry, because you're also constantly writing emails and contracts and proposals, and your writing skills need to be on point, because it always surprises me for a world that is reliant on email and text, that nobody actually knows how to use this stuff. The emails that I get can be jumbled and they're all over the place, and sometimes I have no idea what my clients are saying. I don't want to get them on the phone, but nobody knows how to pick up a phone. So you have to know how to communicate in email, and if that's the only writing you do as a planner, fine. But it's really, really important to know how to structure your writing. Very, very important.
I would say kind of piggyback on the same thing. Take classes. When I was here, they threw me into marketing in my position the past year. I've never had marketing experience, so I went out and just took marketing classes outside of here. I met with a few marketing companies just to give me advice. I went to seminars to learn floral. I did floral classes. So put yourself out there and go to these things, and just go to random places to learn how to do it, and it'll broaden your experience and kind of what you could bring to that job. If they're looking for more than just event planning, if they have the PR aspect in it or the marketing, you can at least bring all that experience to that.
So unfortunately, folks, we're getting short on time. Some folks may have 4:30 classes. One question we didn't ask, but it's really important probably. The sun, the moon, and the stars. When the client wants all of it, how do you figure out what you can and can't give them? And piggybacking maybe the most daunting client flyer you had a chance to put out. We have about a little less than 4.5 or 5 minutes remaining, so turn over to you folks.
My best way to handle client expectations is to present an alternative. So if they show, let's say, a Pinterest picture, or they say, why is a DJ going to cost this much? Like, it's only 4 hours. You paint a picture for them. We tell them, that's great. Glad you like that. Glad you want that. But let's think of it in different terms. When it comes to, let's say, paying for a certain vendor like a DJ, you break it down. You explain why they're paying for what they're paying for. It's more than just 4 hours. You break it down into layman's terms so that they can understand. And then when it comes to, a picture that they saw, we obviously tell them why and if it can't be done, but here's an alternative of what else we could do that would be either A, in your budget, or B, achieve a similar result, or, let's just look at a different way to do it. That way they still see you as the expert and they trust you, and you can still get them something that they want to do.
I fortunately get to generally be my own client. I'm not beholden to a client necessarily. We set our own budget and I come up with our own vision. But I'd say my boss at Columbia was probably the closest to that kind of client role. And we heard every year we've got to cut the budgets by 10%, but increase the attendees by 10%, which is just basic events math. But if you've got to feed 10% more people, it's going to cost 10% more. We can't feed more people for less. So just being, I think, using your creativity about, well, instead of a formal sit-down dinner where there's wait staff that are serving them dinner, can it be more of an hors d'oeuvres reception that would save you a little cost on areas? And I was working there in '08 when the recession happened. So we also ran into the area that you might hit in nonprofit where we needed to make our events look cheap in the sense of we were serving donors who wanted to know that their money was going to important things like scholarships. Their money was not going to the gala dinner. So we had to make the event look nice, but also make the event look cheap. And sometimes it cost more money to make the event look nice and cheap than to just make the event look nice and expensive. So there's all sorts of different expectations you might come into that way. It's just being able to be creative and use different areas in that aspect.
I think it's one of the more challenging things as an event planner and designer to know what a client wants and then find out what their budget is, because you are dealing with these articles on the internet that will tell you what the average cost of a wedding is and all these statistics, and I have no idea where these numbers are even coming from. I have never been polled in my life as an event planner, ever. But clients latch on to what they want to hear, and one of the most popular things that people will hear in this area is, well, the average wedding costs $28,000. That is not true. The average wedding in this area is $50,000. And in New York, it is $80,000, and that is average. And I don't ever have a client that wants something average because they're all on Pinterest with inspiration from Preston Bailey and Mindy Weiss. And I have a client that came in and booked with me 3 weeks ago, and she showed me what she wanted for her wedding. I said, that's Hillary Duff's wedding. That tablescape is $1,500. You have 24 tables. Quick math, 1,500 times 24, that's just your tables. So I'm a very big fan of trying to educate and say, this is what it costs. I know what you want. I know what it's going to cost. Can we bring it up or not? And it's also one of the things I do in my consultations before I decide if I'm going to take the client, because as I mentioned before, if the budget is just not there for what they want, the problem is they are going to look at you as a miracle worker and say, but you're the planner, you know everyone, you're supposed to be able to get this. And sometimes it's just not possible, and you are constantly battling with the people I like to refer to as the peanut gallery, which is the bride's mother saying, oh, no, but we went to this wedding and she only paid blah, 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 blah. So your planner needs to do some more research, and you're constantly fighting that stuff, what they read on the internet, and I'm very blunt with my clients and ask them to please not tell me any of that because I can't fight that. It's about taking what they want, being honest with what it costs, and then saying, and sometimes there will not be a way to make it look the same for what they can pay. And it is very important to be honest with them, because if you say, okay, well, we could do this and we'll just scale it back. And I have this problem a lot with flowers, and every bride in the world wants peonies, and they're like $1 billion a stem, and to scale it back, they can't see it. And then when they do see it, it's like, oh, it's not what I wanted, but you said it was going to be, you have to be honest. If you can't make it work where you know if they're going to be happy or unhappy, if you know they're not going to be happy with that number, you just have to be upfront with them, because you do not want a bride on the day of her wedding saying, you promised this and now I got that. So that's it. You do the best you can, and there are places you can scale it back, and then when there's not, as long as you're honest, that'll keep you out of trouble in that area.
Gina?
I would say the same thing, the honesty. Also, you guys are all communication majors, so it's the way in which you communicate with your clients on the way you say how, well, I could do this, but I can't do that. I had a client the other day who, I don't know if any of you have been in STEM, wants to turn the whole wall of STEM into a flower wall. But her budget for it was only $5,000 for a flower wall, because she saw it on Pinterest, and they can make it themselves, they said. So it's sitting there and explaining to them and breaking it down and kind of showing them, if you want it professionally done, this is why it's going to be more money, but why don't we do a smaller roll? Let's cut it in half. Let's do it behind your table. So it's all about accommodating them, within their budget. Pinterest is probably the worst enemy, as much as I like it for myself personally, for event planners. Every single time I meet with clients, it's, here's all these pictures, or I've had a lot of clients send me their Pinterest wall and say, this is what I want my wedding to look like. So it's hard to reach those, so it's just the way you communicate with them and explain it to them. And like I said, you're all becoming professionals in that right now, so use that in with all your clients.
Folks, before we close, we are right up against the 4:30 mark. How about a round of applause for our panelists here? Thank you, folks, for being with us. And we would be remiss if we didn't mention, too, that Professor Carol Stravalka here has headed up our events class for a while, so a round of applause for her as well. Okay. Folks, we are right up against the 4:30 time, which means we are done. If you haven't registered yet in terms of being here, please see Stefani back there so you can go ahead and register. Aside from that, we are done. Folks, you'll be around if anybody has any questions to ask you. For a little couple minutes, feel free. All right, folks, if you have any other questions you want to ask individually, otherwise we are done. Folks, thank you for showing up. Pleasure. Very good. Nice job, folks. Nice job.